Well, hey, this is Tom and Steve, and this show is all about officiating in Ultimate.
That's right, that includes observers, game advisors, line assistants, and even self-refereeing.
We have got a special guest with us from the WFDF to tell us all about it. You're watching BlockStack TV. 2, 1. Hey, and welcome to BlockStack TV. I'm Tom Stiles.
I'm Steve Jagger. This is BlockStack TV, offering unwelcome, unsolicited, unbinding perspectives from the comfort of our own sofa. I'm going to get it right eventually.
No, you're not. And today's episode, as we said, is all about officiating in Ultimate and the ways we're doing it at the moment, coming up to Worlds in London in 2016. I'm pumped, Steve's pumped, I hope you're pumped if you're coming. It's going to happen there. We're going to see game advisors for the first time, or second time at a big...
Well, not even the second time, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. And we wanted to bring in somebody who...
We had high hopes.
Yeah, we wanted to bring in someone who knew about this stuff from the WFDF.
Mm-hmm. We made a few calls.
Brian Gissel, not available.
Sent a few emails. Most of them did not respond.
Greg Connolly was busy.
Who else knows about
Patrick Van
game
der Valk?
advisors?
He wasn't around.
But Ruben. Just sounds like a sandwich.
He was washing his hair. Yeah. But hey, we did find this guy.
We dug deep to the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, and here he is.
It's funny what people will do when you give them enough red wine.
Please welcome everybody, Mr. Liam Kelly to the BlockStack TV sofa.
Applause.
If you could just give yourself what's the elevator pitch for who Liam Kelly is?
Liam Kelly is an employee of UK Ultimate. I am the coaching and development manager, and I have worked for UK Ultimate since 2010.
A while. And why should we give a monkeys about your perspective on officiating Ultimate?
Well, first of all, part of my job is to explain self-officiating and all those things to teachers, non-players, as well as players through our coach education system. But also because at World Clubs in 2016, 15, 14,
Lecco.
Yeah, in Lecco, I was injured and unable to play for my team, so I was asked to participate in the experimental, WFDF's game advisory thing just before they decided that they would ratify it into the rules. So I've been involved in the process since then, which came after the sort of decision that something needed to be. I'm really conscious not to,
not to show off your lovely. Cool. And so now you're part of the committee.
I am a part of the committee. There is, you named all the committee. There's Ruben. There's Ruben, who was in charge of the task force. The task force was the group of people that got together post some certain events that led people to decide that there needed to be something, not nothing.
Yeah.
So he led the task force. He chaired the task force excellently, and they came to a conclusion. And he sort of invented this idea of game advisors, and then it was developed by him, myself, Greg Connolly, who invented the observer system in America, and we are joined by the chair of the Ultimate Committee, which is Brian Gissel. Grizzle?
I think it's Gissel. The Vancouver guy.
Yeah. And also the chair of the WFDF Spirit of the Game Committee, Patrick.
All right, excellent. So there's two questions for me that come off of that, and one of them is you mentioned things and events that happened that prompted this, and then the other one is the different aspects of officiating that we mentioned at the very beginning of the show.
Yeah. So should we go through those first? What are the four different types of officiating that might happen at a Frisbee event?
And is it limited to 4?
Number 1, referees.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's referees, and that happens in MLU, AUDL. And then there are observers, which happen in a lot of American tournaments, but not all of them.
What are the key differences between what can a referee do? What can an observer do?
A referee is a referee like you would expect in any other sport. Makes decisions on behalf of the players, is an expert in the rules, and it's their perspective of how the rules are enforced.
Okay.
So there's a very definite line between them and everything else.
And AUDL and MUL, they have different systems of referees. They have one referee or they have many referees?
Yeah, they have many referees, both, and the MLU and the AUDL actually use different rules slightly, and therefore those referees use the rules differently.
I think that's interesting, the MLU and AUDL, because they implemented referees, my understanding is to make the game more watchable.
Mm-hmm.
Which then goes to the next question as to why these things are good. But they also changed the rules quite a bit.
Yeah.
For example, a travel's a turnover.
Which does make sense.
Yeah, but that's not something that we do. But again, it's more watchability focused, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's actually a really interesting example, because the reason why a travel's not a turnover in self-officiating is because there's a whole angle that needs to be where players can never take possession from another player on a call.
Yeah.
So a travel in every other sport is a turnover. But because we don't use third-party referees, it's not a turnover. That's the reason.
Oh, yeah, right. That's very well explained.
Okay, so that's refs.
Mm-hmm.
Observers, gone. Take us through observers and what they do.
So observers are there to help with self-officiating. It's still the players that make calls. Observers can't step in and make an active call, but their decision is binding once they've been asked to step in. So if you and I were engaged in a foul and we didn't call it, an observer wouldn't run in and they'd be like, it's a foul. So you and I decided that that's fine. But if we made a call, we would talk to each other, and then if we didn't agree or we wanted to, we would go to the observer, Mr. Tom.
And I'd come in and say, Steve's disc.
Yeah, you say my perspective is blah, 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 and then he would make a ruling, and then that was final.
There's no argument after.
No.
Okay.
So okay, go ahead.
They also have, but they do also have things that aren't as passive, which are time infringements. There's a relatively famous one, relatively recently. That's what that note was about. In the college championships, the observers gave yardage for the team swearing, and there's a whole Ulti World article about it and stuff. So it's like it feels like they're crossing the line a little bit, because they are enforcing. Yeah, they even have yellow cards and red cards, which looks very much like refereeing in that regard.
Well, yeah, there was a, maybe it's not the one you're thinking of, where you could hear the offending word on camera.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they're fucking live here. Let's go. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of lost them the game.
Yeah.
Inside backhand. No hops.
And it wasn't even a negative scenario. It was let's
like
go, guys.
Yeah, and then there was some guys who I don't know, but also Brummy wrote some quite interesting perspectives on that.
I read that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So observers, they can make when their calls are binding, basically is the big difference. When asked.
Yeah.
But they can also make some.
But they're not. They are not proactive like referees.
But they can make active calls in certain situations with times.
Yeah, nothing to do with the play, but to do with conduct and timing and things outside of the play.
Okay, so that's refs, observers. Bring us up to date with game advisors.
So game advisors are there to again support self-officiating. Critically, the line that isn't crossed is that game advisors do not make binding calls. They offer perspective and support the two players in the resolution. So you and I are engaged in a foul, and then we would go to Tom, who's the game advisor, and we would say, what did you think? Tom would come in, clarify the situation, give his perspective, and maybe if we were misinterpreting rules or misunderstanding rules, he would help us through that. But it was us that came to a conclusion.
Right.
Tom might say, it can be as blunt as, what should the outcome be? And Tom would say, from my perspective, you were filed, it should be blah blah blah. But then would suffix it with, but my decision is not binding. It's up to you to decide.
Okay.
And we could continue arguing.
No, you couldn't.
So what happens then?
Well, after, in the rules of Ultimate,
so then it goes back. And it's not decided.
If you can't come to a conclusion in the rules of Ultimate, that's a contest.
Okay.
A non-decision is a contest.
Okay. So and there is one more, which is line assistant. If I'm right.
Yeah. So that's just like a super tame version of game advisors. They're not really there to get on the field and help and all those sorts of things. It's just a way of formalising what already happens in self-officiating, where in beginners games or youth games, you have somebody who's there to support like knowledge of the rules and making sure that people are like learning the rules and all those sorts of things.
And you have practical experience of that when you're teaching with schools and teachers.
Yeah, I do that essentially refereeing the games with beginners and with teachers and things, because it's quicker and easier. But it's not like I'm blowing a whistle and giving fouls and penalties or whatever, and cards and all that sort of stuff. It's just that like I do use a whistle, but I blow the whistle to explain what's happened so that they know and they understand, so that they're learning.
Yeah, so you're trying to teach the rules at the same time as you're teaching how to play the game. It's quite a difficult thing.
Yeah, and then you can encourage them to have a conversation like, well, what do you think, and blah blah blah. You can facilitate that. But the line assistant is just formalising that, and it can be lots of other things as well. It can be used in competitions to help with line calls. But that's like when we say, was I in, to like the guy who's sitting on the sideline, like looking at the sky, like. What would you rather have, that, or would you rather have somebody who was running up and down, whose sole purpose was to help you with line assistance?
Cool. So that's the refs, observers, game advisors, and line assistants.
Mm-hmm. And then self-officiating.
Self-officiating is what
the original, I guess.
We do with the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And then probably the majority of people still do.
Yeah, probably 95% of, maybe even more, of the games that are played, or the Ultimates played in the world is still just self-officiating.
So that kind of brings us to the other question, and I think maybe we need a sip of wine before we jump into all the controversial things we're going to try and get out of you on this one, Liam. Right. The big question, why we really brought you here. So Tom and I have had an ongoing discussion, friendly, sometimes on air, while we're doing commentary. I've been fairly pro-observer, I think, since 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And our on-air discussion was during Worlds in 2008 in Vancouver, where you were kind of, you were the hippie in the situation there. You were anti-observer.
Yeah.
I was pro-observer, but my knowledge of observers was a bit, weak. I just liked the idea that people not bickering about line calls was good to me. But essentially, that's a line assistant.
Mm.
So what I'm curious about now is what has changed in the system. What has been the impetus for WFDF to get involved, create this committee, and address the situation on a larger scale?
Something must have come to a head,
Yeah.
where they said like, okay, well,
hold on,
we can't go without these anymore. Something needs to happen. What was that?
So there were definitely key moments, but they were more like the straw that broke the camel's back than
that's what we want to know.
than like
Dish the dirt. Come on.
Yeah. But I'll start with saying that it's mostly because the sport is changing in a positive way. We've got huge player growth globally, and also there's an aspiration to make the sport watchable, viewable in a sort of like media market, all that sort of stuff. So there's an incentive there to make sure that the game flows and is controlled and all those sorts of things. And then there were obviously some incidents that we all know about that very rarely happen.
Let's assume for a second that a lot of people out there don't know about them because they're not as geeky about Ultimate as the three of us are.
Okay.
Explain specifically.
So I think the big one was in 2012, the game between Canada and Japan. I feel like I'm throwing salt on old wounds, but that was an element of like people watching that and sort of being horrified by, oh, is self-officiating not working and all that sort of stuff.
So people, if you haven't found it on YouTube, there's a jump cut of, is it 70 plus different incidents where Japanese players were knocked off the disc. It's basically every Canadian foul against the Japanese.
That's a little bit unfair, but yeah.
that is a bit unfair.
Okay.
Because there's also an element of like the language barrier and like very much a misinterpretation of the rules by both parties.
Right.
But what's quite obvious in a visual element is the fouls and the egregious body contact by the Canadian players and stuff like that. And I think for some people it was that not enough is enough, because there's not some sort of persistent problem. But people were saying, well, if we want to be viewed and watched, like, is just the peer pressure of our community saying that's not an acceptable way to work, is that enough, or do we need to have something a bit more formal? Because not a year previous, like, I was involved in a European gold medal match where a Swedish player, for want of a better explanation,
we were commentating on that game.
Yeah,
we didn't even see it.
Nobody saw it, and and this player sort of catch the disc, for the people that don't know, caught the frisbee, landed on the ground. The ground stripped the frisbee from his hand. He picked it up and then claimed a goal.
Celebrated the point.
Celebrated the point. And like, no one really knows other than him whether or not like he misinterpreted the rules and thought because I had it I'd scored a goal, or and that allowed him to pick up the frisbee, or whether or not he did cheat. What people say is like, would that have happened under another officiating system? Short answer is yes, of course it would happen under another officiating system. You see it all the time. For all the pained English football fans, John Terry's misallowed goal in the World Cup that we go and get thrashed by Germany after that, we would have been 1-0 up. That's a big deal. That's a heavily refereed game. So refereeing isn't the answer in that situation, but people were saying that it opened the debate anyway.
It kind of switches both ways too, because if you look at a situation like that and think this wouldn't have happened, and it happened maybe because of self-refereeing, and then you can easily go the other direction, which is kind of the direction of the open letter that you got there, where you look at sports, and I'm just going to think of a sport where refereeing can get in the way, football, where people are taking advantage of the referees to try and gain advantage by faking this and faking that.
Yeah, well, and it's a skill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's accepted in football. And anyone who is anti-football players doing that sort of thing needs to remember that their team wouldn't be in the position that they're in if their players didn't do those things.
Yeah, yeah.
And also just the fact that, like, in soccer, football, Premier League referees referee the game completely differently to the Sunday League version of the game, despite like football's ambition to be the same all the way through. Anyway,
so the WFDF decided that something needed to happen. The game advisor system has been born as an idea. So talk to us about the structure that's around the structure that you're part of, the structure that's around the development of this, and what's happened so far with introducing game advisors.
So I think first of all it's really important to know that having game advisors is not a done, dusted decision. That we're still in a period of trying different things and seeing whether or not it works, and that's really important to know. And so in 2000 and we said it before, 14 Lecco, yeah. So in Lecco we had a very sort of tame version. We were essentially line assistants, but in that year the Congress, the WFDF Congress, decided that they would try game advisors, but because the Congress happened at the event, we couldn't then create the system and do it. But then the following year, in London under 23s, we used a developed under 23s system with trained game advisors who did the system at that tournament, implemented the system at that tournament.
And you were part of that committee.
Yeah, I was in the crew, in the 5-person crew that was at World Clubs. So that was me, and it was 4 trained observers from America, 2 from North America, 2 Canadian observers, and both MLU AUDL refs, and 2 observers from the USA, both of which don't take part in that. One of them works for USAU as an employee. The other one invented the observer system to begin with.
So we're talking about a lot of very experienced people that are used to officiating ultimate.
Yes.
But being asked to work under a new system, a new set of guidelines and rules.
Yeah. So at World Clubs, we weren't allowed to give our perspective on call, on fouls and all that sort of stuff, but we were on lines, because line assistance has existed for years.
Right.
Line assistant has existed way before we ratified game advisors. And we were essentially doing a sort of like that version on steroids a little bit.
Cool.
So what are the lessons learned from that? I mean, you're doing it again this year at the World Ultimate and Guts Championships.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's going to change?
So the lessons from World Clubs to under-23s was that we're completely useless if we can't give our perspective.
Okay.
and actually led to frustration by players who wished we could just say it like it was.
Right.
Under-23s, we learned that we needed to do a bit more about how we trained the people, and being more concise, so that our intervention didn't create longer delays.
Yeah.
Because in very rare, but it did happen, situations, our involvement made it longer for a resolution.
Yeah.
And that was because we were doing things like stumbling over what we could and couldn't say and how we could say it, and being sensitive. And it was important to be sensitive, but it was problematic. So this time round, we haven't made any wholesale changes, although we talked about them. It's fundamentally going to be the same under 23s, but hopefully just more refined, and just a few tweaks here and there, and obviously a crew 2-3 times the size, because the event is huge.
And you didn't officiate every game in London. There was only
No, but we officiated every team.
So every team had an experience of playing under a game advisor controlled game.
Yeah, and if they didn't, then it was like just 1 or 2 that just missed out because of, sometimes we had to, we were requested by the Spirit of the Game Committee to go and help certain teams who were struggling with sub-officiating. So sometimes we had to make sacrifices for or maybe they haven't experienced it much, but it's much more important that we go over to Team X and help them, because there were a lot of nations there that needed help with sub-officiating. It wasn't as fluid for them as it was for the more developed nations.
Okay, so talk to us about some of those experiences, particularly comparing and contrasting teams like the USA who play they play with observers all the time, with teams from the UK who don't ever, and then maybe some of the South American teams who perhaps at previous tournaments that me and Steve have seen have had more of a reputation for maybe pushing the boundaries on self-officiating.
different
different idea, different perspective. So I think in their own nation they don't push the boundaries on self-officiating, but when they come to a world stage where the accepted culture and all that sort of stuff is more leaning towards the nations that have always been at the world stage, the UK, Canada, America, Germany, Sweden, Japan, those countries are always at the World Championships, so they just know, and they know through osmosis, they know because the teams before them knew and all those sorts of stuff. And then when the other nations come, younger nations like the South American teams or Taipei, it's no wonder that they struggle a little bit, because first of all, maybe the first time that their nation's been to a World Championships,
right,
and then second of all, the physicality and ability of the teams that they're playing against is creates a different challenge. And then this is the first time that they're there, what they think is right about self-officiating, it's the first time that they might realise that that's not right,
Oh, okay.
And that's going to be hard.
They get their understanding of the game and what's normal challenged in an international arena under the heat of competition.
Yeah, that's challenging, and so the whole game advisor system is only really going to be used in those situations in the short term. So it's there to help with those situations. And we also have the luxury of some of our game advisors have been picked because they speak multiple languages.
Cool.
One of them in particular speaks Japanese, and she game advises most of the games with Japanese teams, because that's sometimes the only problem or challenge that there is in matches is just the language barrier.
So the Americans they're used to playing with observers. How did they adapt to playing?
By and large, they just wished that we were observers, really, because they love the observer system, and rightfully so. It works for them.
But why would they want? What was different about the observer system that they preferred it?
It's just quicker.
Oh, okay.
And definite. There was no, and they struggle with the nuances of WFDF to USAU rules and stuff like that. And hopefully, there's going to be a consolidation of the rules over the next 5 or 6 years, anyway. But yeah. So you asked about my experience of all the nations and all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to say I'm not going to make generalizations about which nation is better than which at self-officiating. But what I will say is that there is, I think, an unfair assumption that North American teams will be worse spirited in a non-observed situation because they've been let off the chain or whatever people are thinking. Whereas in fact my interpretation of elite North American teams is that actually they're extraordinarily well spirited and stick to the rules much better than their European counterparts, because they're pulled up on it more often.
Yeah.
And they're conditioned through a system that they have to not, particularly around the mark, right? Generally they don't hack as often on the force, and are much more receptive to a game advisor, somebody just saying I think you were too close there, or or a coach or a captain just saying those things, versus European teams who it's not that we're doing it on purpose. It's just that's just the way it is, because no one's really pulling us up on it. I think the perfect example is North American teams are not offside on the pull, and European teams are offside on the pull.
Almost always.
Always, and that's just because that's just the way it is. It's not that people are going out there and let's be it's a tactic, let's be offside on the pull. It's just that up until now, no one's been saying you're offside. And in fact, when it comes down, I can cast my mind back personally to a couple of games, a couple of tour finals, where it's it gets really close and everyone's saying, oh, if they went offside, and then you send a player down there to call the offside, and it's all a big hoo-ha about people being offside. So, well, it's in the rules.
Yeah.
So that leads me to then another aspect of this. What are the misinterpretations about the observer system or the game advisor system, and the way people might fear the game that it might go if we implement this? Because I know Tom's still reading this.
I'm trying to pick out a pithy quote from this article, but I'll let you answer the question.
An epic open letter that expresses some aspects of potential fear about a game advisor system becoming the norm.
Yeah, well, first of all, I completely respect the fear, because it's very important that we protect self-officiating as a unique element to our game. Though I would argue not quite as unique as people might suspect. Lots and lots of sports self-officiate. The thing that's unique is not that we self-officiate. The thing that's unique is that we self-officiate at competition level, at a high competition level. Sports like tennis and golf and countless other sports self-officiate. It's not, and that's actually how I get the message through to teachers when they say, that's mental, how would you possibly do that? But anyway, that's a tangent. So yeah, I respect the fact that people think like the slippery slope is an example that people bring all the time, but I think that's a myth. I think that's a fundamental flaw in viewing it as a scale. Whereas at one end, like let's say the left, you have self-officiating, and then on the right you have refereeing, and that somewhere in between is observing, game advising, and it's like it seems like quite a logical scale to draw. But I would argue that they are just all forms of officiating. And like it's more like a different way of viewing it, that some are more intrusive in certain areas, and some like leave you more vulnerable than others, and that not like refereeing has as many flaws as self-officiating and vice versa.
So one of the big fears, and I think as somebody who's done a lot of commentating, watched a lot of big games, especially in front of big crowds, which does change the dynamics of how easy it is for players to communicate. One of the things that has frustrated us when we commentated in 2008 in Vancouver, big final, big noisy stadium, was that it took some of the calls 4 minutes to get resolved. It ruined what was otherwise an absolutely sensational open final. It was an absolutely cracking game, and then you had this big 4-minute delay, the crowd going booing and hissing and all that sort of stuff, and that was the point where I kind of switched on that this needs fixing if the sport is going to be watchable on television. And then 2 years later, when we met up again in Prague, and we saw how we had another chat about observers then, and we did a little feature on it when we were in Prague. One of the things I'd done is I'd watched a game in America on the video where observers were involved, and actually all of the things I feared would happen didn't happen at all. The observers were very passive. They barely played a part in the game, but when they did, they fixed exactly the things that they were meant to fix. I do get why people are worried about this, but I also get that the sport is growing, and at the very, very highest level needs to do something. And from watching the game advisors in London last year, and watched a lot of games with game advisors, they were almost always helpful. So from my perspective, it seems like there's a balance that needs to be struck, and this is a good way of striking it. Steve, I don't know if you've got perspective on it.
Well, absolutely not. I think game advisors are a good thing, and observers are well, I guess it's the happy medium, isn't it, of observers and self-refereeing. I mean, I've been a fan the whole time, so I'm not going to resist any of this. I'd like to think I don't have a fear.
I'd like to just challenge something that you said, which was about the long delays. I personally don't buy that argument.
Sorry, about the what?
You said that long delays. You used the word problem fixing, blah blah blah, about long delays.
Right.
I don't buy that argument. I think that's a frustration that people have jumped on. Like, long delays happen in lots of other sports. Our challenge in Frisbee is that we haven't found a way to make that entertaining.
Right, interesting.
So like you could have, like, there's nothing better than controversy. The reason why in soccer, I can't believe I just said that, but the reason why in football they don't change. They could easily stop people diving in the penalty box by, if you're caught, if retrospectively you're caught to be simulating a dive and you're banned for 6 months, no one would ever dive again. So you could fix the problem, couldn't you?
Yeah.
The way that you fix it could be different, but you could fix the problem.
Yeah.
They don't, because that keeps football on the front pages of newspapers. Because football knows how to do controversy and make it entertaining. Football is entertaining because of those reasons. Match of the day is refereeing decision of the day. They talk about the refereeing. They have a segment. They have a segment where they talk about the refereeing decisions.
Yeah.
Because it's entertainment. Like,
it's part of the game.
Yeah. So
part of what keeps it unpredictable.
Yeah. So why couldn't we have the good guys and the bad guys, like in calls, and like, and I personally don't see a problem with people booing bad decisions and like bad calls and like we do when, you know, at a football match we shout at the referee. And
so we're saying whenever there's a game advisor in the mix, we put a mic on them and we listen in on the interaction.
This is what they did in Australia. They microphoned the game advisors. Yeah.
How did that go?
Well, it was only for a few games, so it's hard to draw a conclusion. But there is a video that you can watch. One of you guys can link it to the viewers.
Yeah.
It's two game advisors, Ruben and another guy who will be coming to Worlds, and they both wore microphones and they stood next to the people who made calls. And most of the time they weren't involved in the calls; they were just there to be the microphone.
Did anything good happen? Was it entertaining?
There were one or two calls that were like relatively argumentative, but for Australians they were pretty well behaved.
It didn't go ice hockey.
No, unfortunately.
Another entertaining sport.
Yeah.
But why would it when there's two people watching you ready to tell you off? Why would it go wrong?
And I think that's an interesting perspective, because if you were a commentator covering that game and you could hear the conversation and you could watch replays of the incident from several different angles, then that
Something
might
to
be
talk
a
about,
really
yeah.
interesting feature of the game. Okay, I can see
Yeah.
that. That's not something we necessarily want to see.
Entertaining
As,
4-minute delay.
a wholly bad thing.
Yeah, and these 4-minute delays are. I mean, like the big talking point of under 23s was the spirit timeout in the final.
That's true, yeah.
And there was loads of drama after that, loads of things written. I wrote a piece, like other people wrote pieces, and like it's just proof that we like a bit of drama, and there was nothing really wrong in what happened. In fact, actually, it was quite amicably, can't say the word, was amicably resolved by both teams. Actually, really was a great display of spirit of the game in the end.
I think some of the Canadians might beg to differ about one or two of the American teams. I was standing around both teams after the match, and there was some animosity between.
You're going to have animosity when you've got
players.
a silver medal in your hands.
I think they were upset about the behaviour of the players.
Would they have been upset if they'd have won?
Yeah, I think they still would have been. I think one or two of them felt jumped all over.
A little less.
A little bit less. They probably would have rubbed the medal in the face.
Yeah, probably.
If you were right after the game, you still got the adrenaline going. I mean, surely they'd look back on it now, particularly because they can watch the video themselves. They might have a different opinion. I don't know.
But the Canadians were very well behaved in that game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I
look forward to seeing a lot of those players again.
Wine break.
We've
been talking a lot.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Liam, we've talked a lot about the controversy, the background, the committee, why we've got them. Explain specifically and in a little bit of detail what a game advisor is going to do during a game, how many of them are there, and how will it affect the game when you're playing at Worlds in London this summer.
So what is a game advisor going to do in a game? Hopefully nothing. That's always our aim. Though if they're needed, they will be there to act in a few capacities. One of them is to help with in and out of bound calls. So the game advisors run up and down the sideline so that they can see whether or not somebody's in and out when they catch the frisbee. They are also there to help on perspective on calls. So fouls, contact, strip, all that's on the field.
How many game advisors per game?
So at minimum there is 2.
Okay.
On a show pitch, there's always going to be 4.
Okay.
And then when they're involved in a call, it's to quickly clarify what's being said, to stop the players from going round in that repetitive circle, and then to offer a perspective and give an outcome on what it should be. Though it's still up to the players to decide how they want to interpret that information and act on it.
Can we have a quick 101 on this?
Yeah.
Guide us through the hand signals.
Oh, you know what's so embarrassing? I just don't remember what that
Oh,
was.
come on. I do. That's contest.
That's contest. So, yeah.
Okay, where did you do it, Tom?
I don't know all of them.
That's offside. No.
That offsides.
Offside is... I just don't remember if I
You don't remember all of them?
Hold on.
Come on.
That's tripping.
Yeah.
Cross-checking.
No, so that's not fuck. So fouled is one arm out, twice hitting on the arm.
Right.
This is offside. This is our signal for offside. When we're lined up on the front of the end zone and somebody steps over the line before they should do, we signal this to tell the other team that they're offside.
Yeah.
We don't make the
They
call.
have to call it.
They
Yeah.
then call
And
it.
they call it by echoing
Yeah.
the call.
And actually, I saw a number of games where game advisor was signalling offside, and the other team didn't actively call it. They let the play carry on.
Yeah.
If the disc was going out, they'd say, "Well, we'll take the disc going out."
Well,
halfway the
absolutely. It's like it's like playing the advantage in any other situation, and so you should. I mean, that's exactly what happens when you brick the pull.
disc. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, the brick is coming, you will just start walking.
Yeah.
You're playing an advantage there.
Yeah. So the hand signals is something else that you guys do as well.
Yeah, so we do hand signals to only echo the call. One thing that we did at under 23s was we were signalling in the end zone, but what we were doing is we were signalling that the players, no one else was making a call to say otherwise. So the players, so when you celebrate a goal, you're effectively saying, "I'm in the end zone," and then because you're in the end zone, you score a goal, and they're both calls. First of all, you're saying you're in, and then you're saying you've scored a goal, and they are calls that the players are making. So we're saying the player's saying that he's in bounds, and the player's saying that he scored a goal. But what we're doing is we're removing that one because it was confusing the commentators.
Yeah.
And the commentators were saying that we were making, like, the game advisor has called him in, and we absolutely weren't. We were saying the player has called himself in.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So we're removing it because it's confusing.
So just hands up in the air.
So it's just the players are signalling that they scored a goal.
The game advisor is cheering the goal.
Yeah.
And do you wait a second after the goal looks
Yeah.
like it's scored, just to make
So
sure?
it's like there needs to be a definite. So the way it works in a 4-person system is we will. So if the goal happens in front of me, I used to do this to signal that the player's calling himself in because I'm the only one that can see if he's in or out. But I'm not going to do that anymore. So I'm going to be like, the player's calling himself in. I'm going to make eye contact with the player opposite me to see if there's any calls in that quadrant. I'm going to look round to the other quadrants, and they'll all be like this, doing a mini goal.
Mm-hmm.
That means there's no calls.
Okay.
But if I'm looking at them and they're doing this, then there's obviously a call.
So there's a travel, or
Yeah,
there's
travel,
a foul on the throw, or whatever, defensive foul maybe.
Yeah, so I'll look
something
around
impeded.
and so I'm doing my mini goal because he's in. Well, he's not in anymore, but he's mini goal. Everyone's mini goal, and then when I've made contact with everyone's eyes, it's like it's full goal.
Okay.
That's how it works. Yeah.
As a commentator, I think the echoing of the calls that you get from the game advisor is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And you start to see players on the sideline and other players start using the calls, using the hand signals.
Yeah, the players are supposed to use the hand signals.
Yeah, I think the hand signals are a brilliant invention.
I find you haven't experienced this much, but we're getting them at tour now.
Yeah.
People are using them to call, like in mixed, they'll call whether it's 3-4-4-3, women or men.
Yeah.
They're actually
man.
yeah, and they're actually using these signals, and it's surprising how many people know them.
Yeah, they're relatively contest.
Yeah.
You know that one,
Yeah, no, this is all
Yeah, well
contest. No contest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Very good. Very
Yeah,
good.
it's-
Okay.
I mean, like that and these two are the only ones you really need to know. Like maybe pick, because
Yeah.
that's the one that
The muscle man.
the pick is what confuses people who don't know what frisbee is.
Yeah.
When they watch it, they're just like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like pick is the one.
Okay.
So is there anything else that we've missed in terms of what the game advisors do, what the system represents that you need to convey?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to convey that what the game advisor says is absolutely not binding, and the players still disagreeing, like amongst themselves and contesting the frisbee is a perfectly fine outcome. In fact, sometimes a game advisor will say something like, "I don't know. I didn't see it clear enough. I don't. We have to have above a 90% certainty. So if we don't have that, we'll say, I think in this situation you should contest the frisbee. And frisbee will go back." Which is sort of what a captain would do in a tour game. You know, they come along and just be like, "Well, you guys haven't come to a conclusion, so the frisbee should go back." Well, that's what they should do anyway. And then also it's really important to know that the game advisor actually doesn't have any powers other than to remove somebody from a game, and that is just a conduct issue, and that would be any WFDF person would be able to do that. But game advisor's in the game right there, and you know, if somebody spat in somebody's face or punched somebody or was racist or something like that, or they they were doing something that was against the conduct policy.
Right.
That's quite long, but the only thing that we can do is warn that person, and if they don't heed the warning, then they get removed.
And someone was removed from the show pitch, but sent to the stands, weren't they? Can you talk us a little bit about that incident?
I'm not allowed to talk about incidents in detail like that, but what I can say is I can tell you that there was a coach, and one of the game advisors was running up and down the line, and there's a space between the line and the restraining line that nobody is allowed in other than the game advisor, and he was just in there too many times, and because he was sort of warned, he was removed from the game because for that, and that was the only reason.
Is that the only time that's happened, or is it?
That's the only time it's happened during a game.
Okay.
It
would be rare.
There's been incidents in lots and lots of tournaments where people have been removed from the tournament for conduct issues that hasn't been as a result, or is after the fact.
Yeah.
But we never had an officiating system, so now is the only time that we've ever been doing
start happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Quick fire question. So try and keep your answers as short as possible.
Okay.
Are game advisors better than observers?
Yes.
Anything more than yes? That was
He said quick fire.
It was really quick fire.
Well, because they're a great compromise. They don't cross the line of binding decisions. Though I would like us to experiment with some of the things that the observers do. Like I would like us to experiment about being on field. I'd also like us to experiment about whether or not we should be more active on in and out of bounds.
Great. Thank you very much. Are game advisors really needed?
Are they needed? No.
Are they helpful?
Yes, very helpful. Okay. I do want to expand on that a little bit though.
Go on.
Because that's a UK perspective. Like, does the tour, does nationals need game advisors? Definitely not. Like, it's not some sort of response to a poor spirit problem. Like, a spirit problem doesn't exist in Ultimate. There's challenges, and there always will be challenges, and there always has been challenges. But there is no spirit problem. There's no need for a system in response to that. But this is a great way to be proactive and to improve the experience of players and people watching.
Are you okay? Steve, do you want to...
No. Why, did he spoil your next question?
No, he did. Well, he actually... we had Ron McGowan tweeting on Twitter. He says, is this purely a concession to spectators or do the players benefit? Well, you just said exactly that. It's for both.
Yeah, well, I think the players do benefit, and the feedback that we've had from the players is that the games are vastly improved. That's why North American players are so pro-observer, because it improves the game experience.
For them.
Like, no one watches, like, pre-quarters, college, whatever division, like... They don't. Nobody watches that, but the players love their system because for them it improves the game. So like, let's get the compromise in. Blah blah blah. Yeah.
What's the hardest call you've had to make? Now, Rob's actually got the question wrong there because you don't make the calls, do you?
What's the hardest call I've ever had to be involved with?
Go on then, yeah.
Okay.
So there was a challenging game at World Clubs, and it was hard because we weren't able to offer perspective. But it was Ragnarok versus Bologna, and there was a force out foul / in and out of bounds discussion, and it was challenging because both players thought that their perspective was right, but my intervention plus the intervention of the captains, in my view, came up with the right goods.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any additional duties you're going to have this time round?
I think we covered that.
That's from Brian Jones. Hello, Brian. Compared to under 23s.
No, we're going to reel back a little bit on some areas, but we're also going to refine, hopefully improve the game advisor player interaction, make that quicker.
Okay. Good. Can we do one more question?
Yeah.
From us? What is your ideal situation? I mean, do you think we're there, or do you have ideas as to where we could go from here?
I would love us to... So first of all, like the game advisor thing, is it here to stay? We don't know yet. Got to come to a relatively scientific conclusion about that, and we need to experiment. Where I would like us to go, I would like us to experiment a little bit more. I said I would like to see us try being behind the play, like the observers are. Because the hardest thing about game advising is when something happens in the middle of the field and you are miles away from the play. And then,
That's something we haven't quite said when we talk about the differences between observers and the game advisors. The observers are on the pitch.
They're right there. Yeah, they're super close, and I would like us to be closer, because when it comes down to when the players really want us to help them, and both of them have a different perspective, but both of them are willing to listen to somebody as they would be a captain or somebody on the sideline. Wouldn't you rather that person was as objective as possible, and for their only purpose to be there to know the rules as an expert and to be watching, that particular situation, versus you're like a player who's like involved in the game on the sideline maybe, and then like the in and out of bounds things happen. It's like, was he really looking at that person's foot? Whereas the game advisor is watching, is looking at that person's foot. So I'd like us to be a little bit closer to the play, and I'd also like us to experiment with not being quicker with in and out of bounds. I don't know how that would look though, but we need to experiment to find out, push that and then reel it back in and try this and have a conversation about that.
Cool. Barmer Sex has also tweeted us a question, but I think we covered the question from them quite nicely earlier on in the show. I don't think we've got anything else to add. So
right.
A massive thank you to Liam Kelly for being in Nottingham tonight with myself and Steve on our sofa and answering all the questions we've had about game advisors.
Yeah. And do we have anything else? Do you have any questions for us?
What was that wine? Because it was really nice.
I don't know. My wife bought it tonight. It was good.
The engine.
The engine behind the voice.
that is both the wine and your wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Liam. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got any feedback you'd like to give us, drop us in the comments on Twitter, or you can hit us on email at show@BlockStackTV. Until next time, he's Liam Kelly. I've been Tom Stiles.
I'm Steve Jaguar.
And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.
Violation. Go! Contest!
No contest.
Retracted, play on. Alright. In. Out. Down.
Up.
Marking infraction. Stall. Travel.
Play has stopped. Time out.
Spirit of the game stoppage. Offside.
Stoppage. For women.
4 men.